What's the hardest thing you've ever had to say no to? Telling the woman I love more than anyone else in existence 3 times. We were 18 and about to go to college. We'd always lived about an hour from each other, and it was finally an opportunity for us to try a relationship. Unfortunately, I had decided to go somewhere else far away because I knew it would be better for me in the long run. She begged me to go to school with her, and through swollen, tear-filled eyes, I told her I couldn't do it. Fast forward 4 years later, she's engaged to be married. I was home visiting from school and we agreed to go out for some drinks. She does a fine job of getting me thoroughly intoxicated and back to her apartment. She lays up, "Do you think we'd be the ones engaged if you'd gone to school with me?" To which I reply, "I really have no idea." She then tells me it's our last opportunity to be together as she begins kissing me. So, you see, we had never slept together, and she figured now, just months before her wedding, would be the best time to tread on that territory. Once again, through a cloudy mind and raging desires, I told her no and left her room. Fast forward an additional 4 years, she's married with a son living across the country. We hadn't talked much since she tried to sleep with me but was going to be in town. At this point, I think we both wanted to reconcile after everything we had been through, and the friendship was too important to lose. We agreed to meet for dinner and for drinks. After a bit of bar hopping, she decides to tell me that she thinks about me every night and is still in love with me, which led to eventually telling me that if I gave the word, she'd leave her husband to be with me. I could never be responsible for breaking up a family, and after a year of no's, finally ended communications with her. To this day, I still think about her and feel my heartbeat in my throat. She's got a real knack for timing though, doesn't she? 3 times? Story 2. 3 summers ago, I had just graduated high school and my best friend was having a party. Usually, I would only go to parties if my girlfriend came with me. We were all set to go, but the day before the party, she started to feel really sick. She told me that she probably wouldn't be able to go tomorrow. She told me to go though, seeing as it was my best friend's party. So I decided to go. I grabbed a case of Molson Canadian from the store and headed over to my friend's place. Now this party was a wild one. Everyone was hammered by the time I got there, and it was only 10 p.m. when I showed up. People were laying on his kitchen countertop, girls were making out. It was basically a single man's paradise. As the night progressed, I began talking to this girl from my English class. We never really talked during high school, but I always saw her around. The conversation was really interesting. We were talking about what we were going to do after high school. We talked about our love of hockey, and somehow the conversation got around to talking about experiences. At this point, the party was so loud that she asked me if I wanted to go somewhere quiet to keep talking. Being the idiot that I am, I agreed. We headed to my friend's room and we continued a conversation about our experiences. She told me that she had always wanted to give a guy a whistle with another girl. I clearly wasn't picking up that this was a hint and I didn't know how to reply. I tried to change the subject back to hockey. We talked about that for a bit until she just straight up asked me a question that I will never forget. She asked me if she should text her friend to come in the room with us so that they could both whistle me at the same time. I was really tempted to say yes, but I just thought about my girlfriend and I politely declined. I reminded her that I had a girlfriend, left the room and said goodbye to my best friend and went home. Story 3. In college, my roommates and I used to hang out at a bar a lot because there was a very hot waitress. At first, I definitely thought she was always nice to us because she was just after tips and she certainly got good ones, but after a while, she started hanging out with us outside of the bar and coming over to our house to drink and smoke and whatnot. So it turned out she actually did enjoy our company. I was dating the girl who would eventually become my wife, so I never tried to do anything with her, although I flirted here and there. Fast forward to one night where my roommates and I are hanging out at a different bar and she walks in with all of her friends. I go over and greet her and we talk for about half an hour or so, then she goes back to her friends. Later in the night, she finds me and is clearly a little intoxicated. She puts her arms around me and pulls me to the side. "Do you love your girlfriend?" It's a dangerous question, so I play it carefully. "Yes." "Okay, but are you in love with her?" "Yes." "Never mind then." Now at this point, my interest is piqued, so I can't just leave it there, so I bring her back and tell her to say whatever she had on her mind. She tells me that she has some old high school friends in town and they were all headed back to her house to hang out and drink some more. She points over to the table they are at, and there are just like 4 or 5 extremely hot girls sitting there. She tells me she wanted me to come. Now, I don't, for 1 minute, believe that she was inviting me back for some kind of fantasy or anything, but I certainly think she was interested and wanted me alone that night. She was incredibly hot, and it was one of the hardest things I ever had to say no to. I told my roommate about it, and he kept assuring me that he would never tell my girlfriend and he'd do whatever to cover for me, but I'm just not that kind of guy, I suppose. but it would have been a hell of a night. Story 4. Several years ago, I was working with youth in youth corrections. One young man who was heavily involved in gangs and the hustling business was not doing well in the program and knew he was going to be shipped out to a more secure, harder program. I had to transport him to his court hearing, and before we left, he called several people, not knowing where he would end up or when he could talk to them again. Before we left, he suggested a proposition to me. He said that when we stopped to eat that I should just let him walk away. He said if I did that, he would make sure I had $30,000 by the end of the next day. You know how you get that gut intuition telling you if things are total BS or not? Well, mine told me that this young man was being 100% honest and would have followed through on his word to me. I seriously questioned it for a second or two, but in the end, I dismissed it and sent him on his way. Sometimes, to this day, I still wonder what would have happened had I let him simply walk away. Story 5. I'm sure this will get buried. Last year, my mom was in the hospital with cancer, split up, staying with her into shifts. Various families of her husband on first, my brother on second, and I was third. Now, she was basically heavily medicated and slept all the time, except she managed to be aware and awake in the middle of the night. She was a nurse, and I had started going to school to become a doctor. One night, she was having a rough night, and I was trying to comfort her. She looks at me and says to me, "I'm scared. Were you?" Now, at this point, we knew how bad it was, so I just looked at her and said, "Well, when you get better, we will go shopping for your birthday as planned." She was very, very unselfish, but liked fashion, an interest we shared, so I took her to the Mag Mile or high-end outlets around Chicago and bought her nice clothes for birthday and Christmas. A few days later, hospice was arranged, and a few weeks later, she was gone. Of course, we kept up the shift thing once she was moved home and passed while it was just me there, which we all knew she'd go with me there just because I was there from the beginning and we had a strong bond. I was scared, but couldn't for 1 second show fear or emotion except strength. I'd lost my dad 2 years prior and didn't want to lose my mom at 26 years old and have no parents left before I hit 27. But looking her in the eye and telling her no, I wasn't scared was almost impossible. Story 6. My parents thought that it might be too expensive and that I might drive them into debt if I went to India for college versus staying in a terrible college in Nepal, as we had no idea at the time how expensive it might be. Coming from an extremely rural area and without prior knowledge of fees, lifestyle in the city, etc., I really didn't have that much guidance nor information to explain to my parents. I didn't have any outside help at the time, so I thought I might have to rely on parents big time and that they might be quite right. I said no to my parents about going to college in Nepal, very inexpensive and affordable, but for a poor quality education. I went to college in India. 2 MS degrees later, I am where I am, happy, and my parents are happy. I did it too, didn't drive them into debt. So many people helped me along the way, thank you all. And this world turned out to be an amazing place. Those of you who debate about going to college for financial hardship, if there is a will, there is a way. Sorry, Dad and Mom, but I had to say no to you at the time, which is probably the only time I said that to you. Story 7. My old boss, in response to an offer to come back to the job I had left a month prior. I really liked that job and I liked the industry. I was also getting ready to start a new, much cooler role in the company. My wife didn't like the area we lived in. I wasn't a huge fan of it either and wanted to move somewhere else. I ended up finding a job closer to her hometown and we moved there. I absolutely hate this job. I hate the area. Moving also meant giving up on a house that we bought as an investment. That was 3 months ago. I still get messages from my old boss and a few of the other managers at the old plant telling me that the door is open if I want to come back. It's getting harder to keep telling them no. Well, at least you could buy a house for the price of a VCR. You know what they say, be careful what you wish for. Story 8. So my nephew got taken away by child services. We live in Texas. He lives in Indiana. We went through 3 Indiana social workers while he went through 3 fosters. We finally got to the background check and home visit with our local social worker. She gives us the notes and progress reports from the child psychologist. Through the reports, he went from not being potty trained, calling everyone mommy, and being considered developmentally challenged with the first 2 fosters to potty trained, knowing his ABCs, and calling his 3rd foster parents mommy and daddy. These parents expressed interest in adopting him. He thought my SIL was a stranger and was terrified of my FIL, even calling him monster. My wife and I both agreed the best thing for him was to stay with his foster parents and not uproot him and risk destroying all the progress he made. Also getting him out of the family and a chance at a normal, stable life. One of the hardest decisions we've ever made, but I don't regret it one bit. Story 9. I had a particularly bad stretch of financial problems after leaving a bad marriage and striking it out on my own as a single mom. Money was so scarce that at one point I was paying for food on my credit card because I had no available cash. One thing I readily sacrificed for and made sure of, though, was that every Christmas there was one thing wrapped under the tree that my son had written to Santa and asked for. I always encouraged him to ask for a few things so that I had some maneuvering room. One year, he proudly announced that he was asking Santa for just one thing: a trip to Disneyland. He sounded so happy when he told me this, a big smile on his face and with this feeling of discovery because he said, "Mom, I know you don't have the money for us to go to Disneyland, but every year Santa always brings me what I ask for. So this year, I'm asking for Disneyland." That's the night I had to tell him, "No, we won't be going to Disneyland because there is no Santa." He was devastated. I was devastated. I had to say no to him about a lot of things while he was growing up, but this one was the most difficult. Yikes, that is a hurtful, horrible way to shatter the illusion of Santa. Story 10. I had to tell my marching band director in high school no when he asked if I was actually going to our every other year parade at Disney World. My family always struggled growing up, but we couldn't afford it. The part that made it especially hard on me is that I already promised him that I could go because an aunt of mine told me that she would pay my way. I was a freshman in high school and felt horrible about it. I felt like I lied to this man who was a fantastic director. The room and flight had deposits put down already, so the program lost money on me. They had to adjust the marching plans to cover the hole I created. All of my friends were going and teased me about not going. I felt like the scum of the school and blamed my aunt who never sent the money, until she called and asked how the trip went. She had sent a check to me. My mom checked the mail, opened the letter to me, and then cashed a check and hid the letter. We were always broke, and she said she used it for groceries, but I've never believed that. Her 2 carton-a-week cigarette habits and my dad's roll-a-week of snuff habit never suffered, but money sent specifically for me for the one fun trip I had an opportunity for certainly did. I still resent her to this day for that. Story 11. I was selling books door to door with Southwestern Books. It was 1986, Lubbock, Texas, USA. I was 19. At 9 a.m., the heat already radiated off the pavement, separating a line of the big bricks, as we call them. These were the neighborhoods where your summer was won or lost. These medium upper-class suburbs had money, children, and moms that did not work. The perfect setup for college guys and gals selling encyclopedias, cookbooks, dictionaries, all the books a kid would need to do his homework, at a price you could not refuse. Just after lunch, I walked up to a ranch-style home with simple Doric columns added to communicate just how high-class a neighborhood I was in and knocked. I never rang the doorbell. Friends knock. People who aren't supposed to be there ring the doorbell. Rather than the door actually opening, it appeared as if this young nymph of a teen just appeared before me. I'd like to think she'd have watched me come up the block. Regardless, there she was, white t-shirt, cut-off blue jeans, no shoes, probably 4'10", blonde, undeniably cute. But me, I just started my sales speech. I was a young Christian man trying to work his way through college, and I was talking to your neighbors about such and such books, and I was wondering if your parents were around. I'd love to talk to them about books to help you with your homework. She smiled, slowly. My parents are not here, but you can surely come inside. I looked at her for a second. In that second, I did some math. I thought about my commitment to Christ. No thanks, I said in a voice an octave higher than usual. I picked up my bag and spun around very quickly and stepped very quickly and ran very quickly into one of those Doric columns, face first. I turned around and she laughed like an imp. Another second passed, the last temptation of Christ. I laughed with her and walked away. It seems cooler now. The heat radiating off the roads had met its match. Story 12. My ex, after telling me, if you come back to her apartment, you can do anything that you want to me. This is when my GF and I had been together for about 5 years or so, and to say that we weren't getting along would be an understatement. We'd been fighting all night, and it seemed as though every other day the discussion was whether or not we needed to break up. I called my GF and told her everything before calling my ex back and letting her know what my decision was. My GF told me that she was devoted to working it out, so I called back and told my ex no. My GF and I worked it out. Ex still reaches out every once in a while. I was thinking about other times that would fit this thread. Same ex-GF when we were together back in high school. She wanted me to take her V card because she loved me. I had a lot of fun with her, but didn't love her, so I turned her down. Repeatedly. That was difficult. In between this story and the previous, she had 2 kids. Story 13. Might get buried, but screw it, I'll post it anyway. My female friend, let's say fembro, had a very attractive friend, we'll call her Hot Pants, who came to visit when I was 18 years old. Hot Pants and I hit it off and went out on a date. When I picked Hot Pants up, she was pretty hammered from drinking with Fembro and crew all day long. Turns out Hot Pants' dad had just passed away and she was having a hard time with stuff in general. We end up making out in the backseat of my car and she tries to take things a step further. But between being sober and having an intoxicated girl with some serious stuff going on in her life, I didn't feel like it would be the right move. So I explained to her that I had a great evening and would love to see her again sometime, but I just didn't feel right about the situation. Now, maybe she was totally fine with getting some no strings attached, and I'm not checking my cis privilege by assuming that a woman can't get hammered and want something, but I got the impression that she just needed some human touch. I don't regret my decision, even though it left me sitting in a giant pair of blue jewels. Story 14. Taking my big sister to an anime convention in Galway. She has minor special needs, nothing serious, just slow to learn and a tad socially inept. I've always said she prefers Pokemon to people. Anyway, I often take her up to Dublin to attend the conventions there. I like to sort out a place to stay and make everything sorted and let her believe that she's the one taking care of her little brother. I'm in college and really struggling to support myself. I got a job offer in a hardware store and took it because I was desperate for the money and didn't have any sort of grant. Ireland doesn't do student loans. Now I have the money to take care of myself, as well as better look after her, but I don't get to spend nearly as much time with her as I like. She loves those anime conventions. I'm 50-50 about them myself, but they're the only places where people don't treat her like she's different. And she can talk to people about stuff she likes, Pokemon, dragons, magic, etc. And people always compliment her dinosaur costume. She gets a few days in the year to be stupidly happy, and when she asked if we could go to the one in Galway while we were in the car, I had to tell her no because I work weekends now to support the family. It damn well broke my heart seeing how sad she was. When I explained the situation to my boss prior with plenty of weeks of notice, he told me, I hired you to work, not to take days off. And now, if I fake sick, he'll catch on, so I accidentally hurt myself in the foot there. I've been dumped, roughened up, and even got harmed by a mugger once, but nothing has ever hurt me more than having to tell my sister no. Story 15. Saying no to sleeping with my crush from high school while she was hammered. About 3 years ago, I ran into my crush at a friend's wedding not knowing she would be there. She was as beautiful as ever, long legs, great smile, amazing personality, and without a doubt beautiful. She had married right out of high school and divorced quickly after, so we had a lot to talk about since it had been 8+ years. During the reception, we agreed to meet at a local spot to have dinner at a later time. I get there and she's there, looking as stunning as I remember her. We chit-chat and she orders us some drinks. I'm happy because I enjoy drinking, but I don't like to drink during first encounters with potential girlfriend material. We throw them back, and after 10 minutes of talking, she orders another. I tell her that's my last because I don't want to get too loopy, and she says, okay. We get our second drink with our food, and she barely touches her food. I inhaled my food and listened to her tell me about her kids, not a deal breaker, while she had 2 more drinks. Fast forward, and it's been 1.5 hours, and she's gone through 5+ hard beverages, Jack and Coke for those wondering, and she says it's getting late. Since I saw how much she had drank, I offered her a ride home, which she took. The way there, she kept saying how nice of a guy I am and whatnot, early signals, so when we got to her place, I walked her inside and was about to turn around when she grabbed me by the shirt and kissed me. I was so excited that I just kissed my crush. We stop and she lets go and nearly falls to the floor. I pick her up and ask her if she's okay. She says, yeah, just help me to my room. I obliged, and in no time she started attacking me, but not in a sexy way. Picture a zombie walking with their shoelaces tied and falling into you and pushing you down. I hit my head hard and wasn't happy upon realizing how intoxicated she really was. I push her off of me and get up, and I pick her up and put her into bed. She asked if I was going to join. I said no and that I would tomorrow if she felt like she wanted to. I walked out of her place slightly angry at myself but morally fulfilled. And if you're enjoying the video, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 16. My first serious girlfriend of about 15 months broke up with me in late August of last year. We had multiple breakups, each time her dumping me, due to arguments or her believing rumors that I cheated on her with a former ex of mine. This final breakup, I told myself this was the end and I wouldn't be strung along by her anymore, though I loved her. At the same time, toward the end, I felt like I was settling and wanted to move on but was afraid to. Well, I met a new girl and started to like her, though she ended up getting a boyfriend. 2.5 weeks after the breakup, my ex called me, begging for me back. She asked me if I still loved her, and I had to say no. She broke down, and her friend, who was with her, tried convincing me to change my mind and take her back, and I had to keep saying no. The next day, this new girl and her boyfriend broke up. It was only a few days, and he already managed to treat her like trash, and we ended up dating that same day. We've been together ever since, so it's also been around 15 months, though we had a big breakup this October, but decided to try again at the end of November after she really wanted me back. To this day, I've never broken up with a girl, but I'm still proud of myself for saying no to my ex. It was hard, but it was better for the both of us in the long run. She's incredibly happy with a new guy, and I'm still with the girl I met, whose feelings I had for ended up being the driving force in saying no to my ex. Story 17. In high school, there was this German exchange student who was super cute, but also kind of awkward. I was taking a lot of German classes, so I started to chat with her and we became friends. She stayed at our school for 2 years. I was single, but she was sort of dating a guy at school, so we kept it civil. I started dating a girl, and the German girl broke up with her guy shortly after. She started pseudo-flirting, but kept it really low-key. I was a good kid and decided to keep it platonic because this new girl I was dating was really great. But I saw the German chick all the time in classes, and she was super cute and exotic since she was European, right? Anyway, she moved back to Germany, and we stayed in touch via AIM. After a while, we would video chat, and she started wearing super low-cut shirts during videos. Then she started talking about how she kind of liked me. Distance plus internet brings down internet scruples, you know? Eventually, it evolved into a discussion one night about how we both wished we'd done something while she was here. It was innocent enough, I figured. I was in a serious relationship with the girl I love, but it's okay to at least tell a girl halfway around the world she'd been on your mind at one point, right? Well, that discussion turned into full-blown, what would you do to me if I was there now talk, which got pretty exciting. Didn't think much of it after that, and we never really had that talk again, but it was pretty forthright that evening. About a month later, I got a phone call from a number I didn't know. I answered, and I heard a girl say, "Hey, it's me. I'm back in town for a few days. Want to hang out?" I hadn't expected that. Time seemed to stop, and my heart rate skyrocketed. I realized that a few weeks before, I had told this girl that if she were here, I would do all sorts of fun things to her, and she had apparently taken it upon herself to come back halfway across the globe to take me up on it. If I'd been single, this would be a much more boring post, but I had been dating a girl for a couple months who I quite liked, but the German girl was here now. In the space of about 10 seconds, I made what could have been a completely life-altering decision. I decided that I would stick to my guns and apologize, but I was too busy to hang out and didn't realize she was coming back. I made up a reason why I was far too busy to hang out the entire time she was supposed to be in town. She said, disappointedly, that it was okay and we'd talk soon. Haven't talked to her since. The girl I was dating is now my wife, and I can't imagine how I nearly almost lost all I have now for a bit of German tale in high school. Story 18. So, my then girlfriend was graduating high school, 1 year younger than me. Her mom and stepdad came down for the graduation from Titusville. Her stepdad worked and works for NASA. After her graduation, we all went to Village Inn for dinner, while she was outside talking to her biological dad. Her mom and stepdad make me an offer. They will pay for me to move to Florida with my ex-girlfriend, pay for my apartment close to their house where she would live, and get me an interview with NASA. Well, we went through the rest of dinner and dessert without anyone saying anything about a move. After dinner, I drove her home and I talked to her about why she wanted to stay where we were without ever telling her what her parents offered. She didn't really have a good excuse. Now, the area where we grew up has a habit of making people complacent with mediocrity, and I assumed that it got to her more than me. So she told me that she really, really wanted to stay. But being the guy that I am, I approached her parents the next day, without her around, and told them that it wasn't fair to my parents to get up and move so quickly, that I would need at least a year before it would be appropriate. They said they understood, and less than a year later, me and her stopped talking. Story 19. When my last girlfriend and I were still talking, we often got hot and heavy, but never got past third. Well, one night, after almost having intimacy, she made me promise that we wouldn't have intimacy unless we were dating. I wasn't thrilled, but agreed because I really liked her. A week or so later, we were fooling around and it got very intense. We were both crazy and literally shaking because we wanted it so much. Eventually, and with the greatest amount of willpower I've ever used, I pulled away. I found out later that while she would have been okay with it, she did it because she wanted to know if she could trust me. It was a ridiculous, ridiculous test that I passed. We went on a date and have incredible, passionate intimacy. We broke up, unfortunately, because she has some issues she wants to deal with on her own. I'm still kind of coming to terms with that breakup, but I'm really glad I held off that night. Story 20. I know this won't seem that bad compared to some of the replies, and I'm sure I've had to deal with worse, but this will always stick out in my mind. I was a groomer for about 4 years, and one day, a little old lady brought in her ancient little old poodle. This dog was over 20 years old and on Grimm's door. He was literally just wandering in circles, looking like he wasn't really all there anymore. He probably had severe doggy dementia. She told us how she had taken the dog to be put down multiple times, but just couldn't bring herself to do it. She begged me over and over to groom her dog, to give him a bath or a haircut. I had to say no. This dog was so old and frail, I knew it would most likely have a heart attack from the stress of grooming. It was really hard. She just kept begging, please wash him, please. He's dirty. He needs to be clean. Please just give him a bath. I had to turn her away. I didn't want her dog to pass away in my arms. I explained why and told her to talk to a veterinarian about what to do. It was sad, but the other groomers agreed it was the right thing to do, and they all said they wouldn't have been able to refuse her over and over like that. Poor old dog. Poor old woman. Story 21. My biological father is schizophrenic and bipolar. I used to see him every other weekend. He made up lies about my mom and didn't trust her for quite a while, from my 6th to 8th year if I remember correctly. I thought she didn't like me because of what he told me. He roughened up my uncle one time and I couldn't see him for about a whole month and didn't exactly know how to feel. I don't even think I understood what had happened. I forgave him. A few years later, he stopped picking me up and I was very upset about not seeing him. Then, out of nowhere, my mother asked me if he'd ever been mistreating me and if I told him that she'd mistreat me. Long story short, he had lied about my mother selling me out so he could take me away from her and move to another country. I had to call him and ask him why he lied with my mother next to me, listening to it. He was sure that I had told him so. I was confused and cried, hung up the phone. I felt really embarrassed. He came into my house that same week, sat on the ground in front of the door and cried. He told me he loved me and he wanted me to leave with him to a much better place. I just said no and ran into the house. I still remember him kicking the door and yelling, I love you, you're my daughter. When the police arrived, he shouted that I was no longer his daughter. Story 22. Mother friggin' spaceship, I once worked in a space support job, mostly supply and admin, that immediately followed my deployment with the Marines. The two were only marginally related, but one day this wild-haired man showed up out of the blue and somehow knew this connection. This in itself was strange as it was a secure facility and he had no escort. He handed me a photocopied packet that was the precursor program to the one linked above. This was around 2005-06. And started giving me the be anywhere in the world to support a Marine Expeditionary Force in 6 hours or less spiel. Obviously, I was intrigued, but explained the problems with this. 1, I really don't think I was authorized to accept a spaceship. 2, I had nowhere to store a spaceship or its launching platform. 3, I didn't have any astronauts or pilots in my employ. And 4, I was pretty sure he was a crazy man who'd managed to get past our security. I then called my security officer and let him handle the walkout. In retrospect, maybe I really could have earned my astronaut badge, you know? That's the day I learned the criteria to earn the astronaut badge is surprisingly low. You just have to reach 15 nautical miles up, not actually be an astronaut. I'll always wonder what would have happened if I just said yes, bring it on by. Story 23. I got offered $5,000 and a free 2-week vacation, all expenses paid, to Vietnam. All I would have to do is marry a girl, and then we'd have to pretend to be married for 2 years, and I'd get regular checks to cover her expenses. I was really broke at the time, and Vietnam is on my bucket list of places to visit, and I don't really have any issue with helping some foreigner become an American. I totally support people's ambition to become American. Being American is awesome. I just got all freaked out about the criminality of it and a little fear that I'd end up stuck in some cheesy rom-com situation by meeting Miss Perfect while pretending to be married. I often regret not doing it now. I would have been divorced for 12 years at this point, and it turns out Miss Perfect never showed up, so basically I missed out on $5,000, a free trip, and 2 years of home-cooked Vietnamese food. I'm a dummy. Story 24. Throwaway here. One of the harder things to turn down was intimacy with a woman in her 40s. I was 23 at the time, but she was also my ex-stepmom. I would babysit my younger half-brother for certain nights for her, and she would come back home around 11 p.m., 12 a.m. on a little buzz from drinking with her friends. I sensed a change in her attitude towards me about after a year her and my dad broke up. The longer she went without intimacy, it seemed the more she thought I was her resource for it and knew that I was a good-looking kid. Like any boy, my hormones were crazy. She was the type of lady who knew she was sexy and she would use it to her advantage. She would do things like angle herself in a certain way when she was digging out of her bag for keys or bend over to throw something away or pick something up right in front of me. There were times where she would answer the door in just a towel, pretending like she had just gotten out of the shower. She wanted to have access with a young guy whenever she wanted, and I was on her source. She would always be doing subtle things to increase the tension, waiting for that band to break and me to finally give in. Boy, did I want to so bad at times. Until this one day, she called me up for what I thought was going to be an invite to babysit just like any other weekend. My younger half-brother got a ferret, and I thought she was going to have me look over him too. Anyway, she calls me up and starts telling me that she is not going out tonight, and in the sexiest voice she can think of, she says, "I'm not going out tonight, but I wanted to spend time with you lately. I was wondering if you wanted to spend the night with me and I can show you some things." There was a short pause. My heart was racing. It was really obvious what she wanted. I was just about to give in when I thought about how bad this might mess me up in the future. It could potentially screw up things with my immediate family and make an already messy breakup even worse. So I hesitated, and that short pause gave her a clue to what I was going to say, so she scrambled to finish her sentence and said, "Things like, ferret stuff, that is, I guess." I told her I was busy over that weekend. She knew I wasn't busy. Her advances didn't stop after that, but they slowed down. You could tell that she knew I didn't want to give in. I've been going to different states for school, and it's been about 6 years. I still think about what would happen if I did say yes. I still fantasize about her every now and then, and we still talk every now and then on Facebook. She's married to another guy. The advances are absent. Part of me wishes I would have said yes back then, but a part of me is proud I said no because I wouldn't want things to get more messy with my family. Story 25. I got offered my dream job. I was in Los Angeles and never liked it too much, so I took a good job in Florida. I liked it a lot better, but it was hot. Anyway, the company I went to in Florida totally collapsed. I lost everything, all my vacation time, weeks of pay, everything. I tried and tried to find a job, and finally I got a shot in Orlando. So I started working up there for a small but growing company. The people are great and friendly. The work is really interesting. I design theme park attractions now, and the money isn't bad. I even got a title bump, though my pay was for the original position. But a few months in, I finally got a message from a friend at a dream company. I mean, the company I've wanted to work at since I was a kid. I used to work in VFX, and the mother of all VFX houses called me. The offer was amazing, insane benefits. It was in San Francisco. What an amazing city. The pay was great, and I'd get to work on some incredible stuff. But this company, the one I'm with now, saved me a little bit. They pulled me from the fire, gave me a job. They've taught me a lot of skills I never have had the opportunity to learn. And I've grown so much. I do a lot of story development, amazing things, and they're in the middle of some big projects. Are they dream projects? No. But I just couldn't abandon these people. They're as much friends as they are fellow employees. They respect me and treat me like an equal. Even though I'd be living my dream and doubling my salary, I said no. Do I sometimes think about that big job? Yeah, all the time. Did I make the right decision? I hope so. I don't have a lot of money and some months can be a struggle, but I have to believe that I'm happier working with people I love working with every day, who I trust and who trust me. Helps me believe I made the right decision. As for the 100K plus job, I have to believe it'll come eventually with time. Story 26. Back in my old dormitory, there was this really cute friend of mine who was always hitting on me, sometimes subtly flirting, sometimes overtly trying to seduce me. That was all pretty sweet, but I knew she had a boyfriend somewhere, and I didn't want to get into that whole mess. One time, after a long night of drinking and streaking, we hooked up. I felt terrible afterwards, so I resolved to just leave it alone from then on out. I figured if she's that eager to cheat, then her relationship must be on the rocks or something. Anyway, I moved into a small house with roommates the next year, and totally coincidental. The girl's boyfriend happens to be my next-door neighbor. Not only that, but he turns out to be the coolest guy, bringing us drinks as a housewarming gift and becoming one of my good friends. And he and this cute girl are still together and doing totally great. I felt like a huge schmuck. So when he had a big house party, we all went, and at some point, this girlfriend, her little sister, and I were all standing out alone on the deck drinking. Mistake. The girlfriend point-blank asks me if I want to hook up right in front of her sister. I hold firm and laugh it off, but then she turns to her little sister, who is also pretty cute, and asks, "You'd help me do it, wouldn't you?" The sister sizes me up and shrugs. "Yeah, I'd be down. Let's do it." It's like a poorly written freshman year male fantasy coming to life. But as I started working out the logistics of this madness, I had to put my foot down. No more doing my friend's girlfriend. They both walked away, disappointed. As they left, I saw one solitary kid who had been laying low in the corner, his mouth open, gaping at me. Holy heck, dude, you've got to be the world's biggest wuss. And well, if you like these stories, here's more for you YouTube things. You're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.